Week 8 of the NFL season is in the books, and it was one of the weeks of the NFL season. It started with the Chargers manhandling the Vikings with a score of 37-10 in a game LA controlled right from the start. And the story of the 2025 NFL season has been any given Sunday every single week. And Week 8 was no different, as the then 1-6 Miami Dolphins went into Atlanta and beat the Falcons with a score of 34-10 in a game that stunned everyone. And in today's video, we are going to break down the biggest winners and losers from the 8th week of the NFL season. We're going to break down things that went right, like Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos putting up 44 points on the Dallas Cowboys in a game where he threw 4 passing touchdowns, or like James Cook having a career-high 216 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in a 40-9 victory for the Buffalo Bills. And we're also going to break down things that went wrong, like the Steelers allowing 35 points at home to the Packers, or the Bengals allowing 39 points to the Jets in an upset come-from-behind victory. And there was a lot to take away from Week 8, and as always, there will be a couple of more winners and losers mentioned at the end of the video, and without further ado, let's begin! And we are starting today's video by discussing the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals lost in Week 8 to the Jets with a score of 39-38, and why the Bengals are in today's video isn't just because they lost to the Jets, it's the way this loss happened. The Bengals were up 38-24 with 8 minutes to play and ended up losing 39-38. And why the Bengals are in today's video is also because of what this represents. The Bengals are dead last in points allowed per game on the season, as they're allowing an average of 31.6 points per game. And there was a point in this game where Trey Hendrickson left due to an injury, and the pass rush without Trey Hendrickson was awful. Not okay, not below average, but awful. And Trey Hendrickson, when on the field, didn't have a great game either, as he played just 23 snaps, but the Jets entered Week 8 allowing a 41.7% pass rush for opposing defenses, and the Bengals registered a single pressure against the Jets in Week 8. One. And not only that, but it was the second time this year they allowed over 500 yards of offense. And since the start of the 2024 season, the Bengals are 1-3 in games they score 38 points, with the lone win coming over the Raiders last year. And the Bengals have allowed less than 27 points in a game just once in 2025, which was in the season opener against the Browns. That's it. And obviously it stinks to have Joe Burrow go down for a large portion of the season, but I would kind of push back and ask, does it matter? Are you going to win a Super Bowl in a scenario that would essentially require you to put up 4 straight games of 35 plus points of games against, actual playoff defenses? And I would say probably not. And this should not be a hot take, but if you put up 38 points, you should win. Period. And to constantly be in games like this is nothing short of frustrating because of how limited, or at times, how helpless you feel. And Jamar Chase was asked after the game if it's on him as a leader to help the defense find leaders of their own, and he said, quote, "It ain't my job, I play offense, not defense," end quote. And I think there's bigger problems in Cincinnati, and just being completely honest, I think they should clean house at the end of the year. And unfortunately, that kind of presents another problem because of the owner Mike Brown, and I'm not going to dive into that in today's video, but to lose 39-38 on a day where the Steelers also lose, and on a day where you have a chance to make up ground in the division and keep your season alive, undoubtedly makes the Bengals one of the biggest losers from Week 8. Now, on the other side of this, one of the biggest winners from Week 8 was undoubtedly James Cook and the Bills. James Cook ran for a career-high 216 yards and 2 touchdowns, and if you played him in fantasy in Week 8, then you probably lost, maybe unless you had Jonathan Taylor. But James Cook's previous career-high was 179 rushing yards, and his now third career-high is 132 rushing yards, which was actually set back in Week 2 against the Jets. But for the Bills to respond the way they did against Carolina in Week 8, especially after the losses to the Patriots and Falcons before the bye, and for James Cook to pull a Greg Jennings and put the team on his back as Buffalo put up 40 points, well, that's a huge win for Jimbo Cook and Western New York. And the Bills are also big winners from Week 8 because they played the Chiefs in Week 9, and this was not a look-ahead game because Buffalo had lost 2 in a row, but it was great for the Bills to get back on track before they play one of the biggest games of the entire 2025 regular season. And the biggest winners and losers from Week 8 will continue after a quick word from today's sponsor, Arena Club. And before we continue, I asked the question, do you like to buy, sell, trade, or rip cards? Because I love opening packs of football cards, and especially rookie cards, with guys I like in the pre-draft process and follow them along throughout their NFL careers. And I do have this JJ McCarthy rookie card, and JJ is my guy. I know he didn't have the best start to his career, but the topic of football cards does bring us to the sponsor of today's video, Arena Club. And if you like opening cards too, well, Arena Club is changing the game with their original slab packs and no fee auctions. And with slab packs, you can rip a pack for as low as $25 and hit on a card that's worth significantly more. And with every slab pack you purchase, Arena Club will make you an instant offer based on its estimated fair market value. There's no guessing or waiting. Arena Club will make you an instant offer based on its fair market value. I absolutely love opening cards, and while making this video, I actually pulled a rookie CJ Stroud Donruss Optic 9 out of 10, and right now you can get 20% off your first purchase or slab pack at arenaclub.com/GFB. Once again, that's 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase at arenaclub.com/GFB. And a big thank you to Arena Club for sponsoring today's video. Next up is the Minnesota Vikings for a couple of reasons. They were humiliated in Week 8 as the Los Angeles Chargers beat them on Thursday night with a score of 37-10, and credit to the Chargers for showing up because, as we know, the Vikings certainly did not show up in Week 8 in this game, but they're in today's video for a couple of reasons. The Minnesota Vikings had a Week 6 bye. They were a very injured team heading into the Week 6 bye, and they've still dealt with their fair share of injuries, which we'll get into in a minute, but coming out of their Week 6 bye, they allowed 28 points to the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts threw for over 300 yards, he threw for 3 touchdowns, and had a perfect passer rating. Both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith had over 120 yards and a touchdown, and A.J. Brown actually had 2 touchdowns in the Week 7 game. In Week 8, the Chargers had 37 points. Justin Herbert looked really good in the first half, and I really believe that if Jim Harbaugh wanted to continue to pass the football, that Justin Herbert could have had a 350-yard game, and that tight end Oronde Gadsden, who, by the way, is one of the big Week 8 winners, as I think that he is the Chargers tight end at least for the remainder of the 25 season, possibly even beyond 2025 as well, and he's undoubtedly a Week 8 winner. There's a real possibility that he could have finished the night with 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Gadsden had 77 yards midway through the second quarter, and then the Chargers didn't target him the rest of the night, and it's not because the Vikings were absolutely locking him up from the middle of the second quarter on. The defense right now for Minnesota is horrendous. You do not accidentally allow 65 total points in a span of 5 days. And not only has the defense been horrendous, which was supposed to be a strong point for this team entering the 2025 season, but the offensive line has also been a disappointment, all things considered. The quarterback play is a conversation worth having for a different video because you can't help if your quarterback sprains his ankle, and the whole J.J. McCarthy thing is that Kevin O'Connell wants J.J. McCarthy to have a full week of practice before he starts again, so he will start in Week 9 against Detroit, barring a setback at practice, and I'll just leave the J.J. McCarthy conversation at that. But whenever you are starting Carson Wentz at quarterback and you are starting Justin Skule at left tackle and Walter Rouse at right tackle, or rather have those guys come in because Christian Darrisaw only played 9 snaps against the Chargers, you are going to be in for a long night. But the defense was also very bad throughout most, if not all, of the Chargers game in Week 8, and they can't get out of their own way. They cannot defend the run, they can't defend the pass, and they sure as hell can't run the football, as they've only had one 100-yard rushing game outside of Week 1 against the Bears, and that was in a 48-10 win over the Cincinnati Bengals, and even that was kind of an outlier game because the Vikings were up 34-3 at half, so whenever you are up 31 points at half, which, by the way, was due in large part to Isaiah Rodgers' all-time defensive performance, you are naturally going to run the ball with a backup quarterback, as Carson Wentz started that game. Also, yes, I do acknowledge guys have been injured with the Vikings, as whenever you're out your starting quarterback, left and right tackle, you're obviously going to be at quite the disadvantage, but you can't just roll over and say, oh, all right, Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert, you guys can get this game, and we'll see after the game, and here's this free win. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't, I mean, ask the 49ers how many injuries they've had over the past, not just year, but past 8 years since Kyle Shanahan took over. It's been frustration after frustration with the 49ers, yet they have been to 2 Super Bowls in the past 8 years. So you can't just roll over and expect the team to feel sorry for you and that you have a chance to win this game. And also within this, yes, the drafting and the depth the Vikings do not have has been frustrating, and it's shown its ugly head countless times within the 2025 season. But head coach Kevin O'Connell also deserves some criticism as well, as there was a point in this game where the Chargers were up 24-3, Justin Herbert threw an interception, and Minnesota scored a touchdown to make it 24-10. I did not think the Vikings were going to come back and win the game, but even when they were down 24-3 and the Vikings were set up with an advantageous situation from a field position standpoint, they were taking down to the last 3 seconds of every single play within the play clock, and if you are Kevin O'Connell, there's 20 minutes left in the game, you're down 3 touchdowns. Obviously, the opposite opportunities you're going to have to score the football are going to be limited, you have to shorten up the play clock or the play call. You can't sit here and have the 35-word play calls to the point where the Vikings are getting out of the huddle with 10 seconds left every single play. So from the combination of the Vikings having no depth, from the combination of the Vikings allowing 65 points in a span of 5 days, and from Kevin O'Connell at times getting too cute with it and not going for the kill or even trying to go for the kill at some point, and also keeping Carson Wentz in the game far longer than he should have, as Carson Wentz should have been benched probably at halftime at the latest, yet he was out there all the way until late in the fourth quarter. Those all play into why the Minnesota Vikings are one of the biggest losers from Week 8. Now, for one of the biggest winners in Week 8, all you have to do is go one state east to Wisconsin to go to the Green Bay Packers. And whenever you watch the Green Bay Packers in 2025 play a game versus the Minnesota Vikings, really outside of a game here or a quarter here, they are playing a completely different sport. Jordan Love in Week 8 had 360 yards and 3 passing touchdowns, and at a point also had 20 straight completions. And Tucker Kraft on National Tight End Day had 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. And when this team is rolling the way they were in Week 8, there is absolutely zero doubt they could get to the Super Bowl. Micah Parsons also had 5 pressures in this game, and whenever the Packers got to the fourth quarter, there was a difference in class between them and the Steelers. The Steelers could not keep up, and the Packers were very clearly the better team at the end of the game, and there's a reason the Packers improved to 5-1-1 and are currently the top seed in the NFC. Now, earlier in the year, after they beat the Lions the way they did in Week 1, and then in a 5-day span because they played the Commanders in Week 2 on Thursday night, I was pretty quick to say that, hey, I think this is a Super Bowl caliber defense whenever everybody is clicking and whenever the pass rush is going, especially with Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary. And you saw that in Week 8, and the Green Bay Packers are going to be a problem as long as they can stay healthy. And Jordan Love, dare we say that he played at an MVP level in Week 8 against the Steelers defense. Now, the Steelers will be discussed later in the video, a little spoiler, but the Packers are absolutely one of the biggest winners from Week 8 as they have also now put up 27 or more points in 4 straight games, and they are clicking, and they play the Carolina Panthers in Week 9, and I would be pretty surprised if they lose that game at Lambeau next week. Next up is the Atlanta Falcons for a couple of reasons. The Falcons have had a very up and down year in 2025 as they started out with a close loss to the Bucs in Week 1, then dominated the Vikings in Week 2 in their stadium with a score of 22-6, and then were shut out in Week 3 against Carolina with a score of 30-0. They also beat the Bills in Week 6, and Josh Allen did not look good in that game, and it was a huge win for the Falcons. But they were embarrassed in Week 8 as they lost to the Dolphins with a score of 34-10, and that's already bad, but it was 34-3 with 6 minutes to play before Tyler Algier scored their lone touchdown in garbage time. And a 34-10 home loss is already bad, obviously, but this was against a team that had just lost 31-6 against the Browns in Week 7. This was against a team that was about as low as you could possibly get entering the game. And I know the Falcons were without Michael Penix and Drake London, but the Falcons internally think they are a playoff team, or at least they can get to the playoffs, and they came out flat in Week 8 and they were outgained by over 120 yards, and Tua Tagovailoa, a player who has been ridiculed beyond measure in 2025, had 4 passing touchdowns against this team. And football is in a lot of ways a game of taking advantage of missed opportunities and what you do off of those missed opportunities, and the sequence that describes this game best was when Atlanta was down 17-3 in the third quarter with a chance to make it a 1-score game. Russell Douglas was called for a defensive pass interference, and all things considered, I thought this was a terrible call, and after that play, I thought, here we go, Atlanta is going to claw their way back in. But a few plays later, Bijan Robinson fumbled the ball in Miami's red zone, and the Dolphins eventually scored on a 43-yard Jalen Waddle touchdown. And obviously that's frustrating, but whether it's Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix, the passing offense has not looked good for most of 2025, and Week 8 was no exception. The offense is predictable, and a lot of the same plays are being called, and the spacing at times within the offense is really poor too. And again, we acknowledge Michael Penix and Drake London were out, but that's been an issue all year. And the Falcons are 3-4 with the Patriots and Colts on deck, and I think there's a very real reality this team is staring 3-6 right in the face. Another player who has faced a lot of criticism and noise throughout the 2025 season is Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts, and there was definitely a moment in the 2025 season where if the Birds didn't right this ship, there would be a lot of uncomfortable conversations. But after the Week 6 game against the Giants, the Eagles put up a combined 66 points in their next 2 games, and over the last 2 games, Jalen Hurts has 7 passing touchdowns and 9 incompletions. And Jalen Hurts is a player who's in a situation where, because he has Saquon Barkley and Devontae Smith and the offensive line, that people are going to throw stones at him no matter what he does, but he's played great over the last 2 weeks in a time he desperately needed to because of where this team was after the Week 6 loss to the Giants. Now, I will acknowledge, and I think Eagles fans would too, the play specifically where the fumble on the tush push was a bad call by the refs, but the Eagles ran for over 275 yards as a team. Jalen Hurts had 4 passing touchdowns to 5 incompletions in Week 8, and they put up 38 points without A.J. Brown, who is one of the best receivers in the NFL. And the Eagles as a team are huge winners as they enter their Week 9 bye, because they can afford to rest and, for lack of better wording, not have to worry or think about the BS they'd receive from the media because of how they've performed over the last 2 weeks. And a bonus, they also have a very big lead in the NFC East. The Pittsburgh Steelers are up, and they're in today's video for a couple of reasons. But the first is they were absolutely torn apart by Jordan Love all night, and like we said during the Packers part, Jordan Love at one point in the game completed 20 straight passes, and he finished the night with 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. But why Pittsburgh is in today's video is because they have now allowed over 900 yards of offense and 68 points in the last 2 games. And it's one thing if you have the killer bees the way they did about 10 years ago, and you can put up that type of points, but this is the highest paid defense in all of football. And by the way, even if you had the killer bees, it still wouldn't be justified. It would just be like, hey, we can kind of compete with this. But the point is with the Pittsburgh Steelers is they are in a desperate situation now because on deck they have the Colts and Chargers. And right now the Steelers are 4-3, and this was a part of the schedule, especially with the Ravens sitting at 1-5 just a couple of days ago, that the Steelers had to take advantage. Because I think if there is anything that we can all agree on is that the Ravens were not a true 1-5 team. They were not a team that you looked at as an easy win and that they would roll over and that they're going to finish with maybe a 4-13, maybe 5-12 record. I think everyone can agree that the Baltimore Ravens are coming and that the Steelers needed to capitalize while they were a bad team. And as we saw in Week 8, the Ravens won by 2 touchdowns and they now have an easy part of their schedule, and it's not out of the question for the Ravens to be a 6-5 team through 11 games, which is why the Steelers needed to capitalize, and unfortunately they didn't. Now, I did sit here and say last week that I was willing to dismiss the Bengals game in Week 7 if the Steelers played really well defensively against the Packers in Week 8. As we know, that of course did not happen, and the reason I would be willing to dismiss it is because I think 2 division games in 5 days for anyone is extremely disadvantageous. But the point is the Steelers had a chance to right the wrong from Week 7 even with a mini bye on the back end of the Bengals game, and they of course did not. But what is also really frustrating for the Steelers, or what is also kind of sad if you look at their upcoming schedule, is they play the Colts and Chargers in their next 2 games, and this was a team that was 4-1, and pretty quickly you can talk yourself into the fact that they may have a 10-win ceiling, because not only do they play the Colts and Chargers coming up, but they also still have to go to Detroit, they play the Ravens twice, and as we said, they were never a true 1-5 team, and they also have to play the Bills. Now, I don't think the Steelers are automatically going to lose all of those games, but with where their defense is currently, I certainly wouldn't pick the Steelers to win any of those games, and now we were talking about a team ceiling that maybe 10 wins, maybe even 9 wins, depending if they drop another game here or there that they probably shouldn't. But why the Steelers are also in today's video is there was a sequence within the Steelers and Packers game in Week 8, and there was a lot of jawing and a lot of extracurricular activity all throughout the game, but there was one sequence in particular that summarized the frustration for the entire night. Pittsburgh was down 29-19. There was about 10 minutes left in the game. 2nd and 7, Jaylen Warren runs for 5 yards. It's going to be 3rd and 2. DK Metcalf gets into it with a player after the play. It was Quay Walker of the Packers, and he commits a penalty, and it's a 15-yard penalty, and it's now 3rd and 17. Obviously, going from 3rd and 2 to 3rd and 17 is the absolute definition of a drive killer, and when you look at how undisciplined the Steelers were, and specifically DK Metcalf, who has largely been for his entire career, and the fact that they have now allowed over 900 yards of opposing offense and 68 points in the last 2 games, is why the Steelers are in today's video. Now, this is one on a bit of a different note, but I would personally say Giants fans are losers from Week 8. Not the fact that, hey, if you root for the Giants, you personally are a loser, but it's more of the fact that, unfortunately, Cam Skattebo had a very nasty injury against the Eagles, and we, of course, wish Cam Skattebo and anybody else that was hurt this week and any week the best moving forward, but it's also the fact that you have a rookie quarterback, and you really want to see Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo develop, and especially with the fact that we saw Cam Skattebo have 3 100 total yard games in the first half of his rookie season, and then also the fact that Malik Neighbors is of course done for the year too. And I really feel for Giants fans because this is promising with Jackson Dart moving forward, and you would really like to see, especially in a rebuilding year, in a year where you have no expectations, the fun moments, the moments where, like you had last year with Drew Lock throwing to Malik Neighbors in a game against the Colts, that you put up 45 points. And in a season where, hey, if we lose this game, but we may put up 30 points and Jackson Dart looks good, those are the wins that you want to have in a rebuilding year. And unfortunately, a lot of that has been taken away from Giants fans. I also couldn't be happier for the New York Jets for scoring the most points they had in a game since 2022, especially with the tragic news that unfortunately came out prior to the Bengals game in Week 8, so rest in peace to Nick Mangold, and also very happy for the Jets to get the win in honor of Nick Mangold. Also, big credit to the Miami Dolphins for coming out and playing the way they did in Week 8 and putting up 34 points on the road for a team that was 1-9 in their previous 10 road games. That's all I have for today. Please comment below who your biggest winners and losers are for Week 8, and a big thank you to Arena Club for sponsoring today's video. And if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe as we are closing in on 220,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.